welcome. My name is Carson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the B Network Program Manager at B Lab US and Canada. And I am so excited to welcome you all to today's Impact Collab on environmental stewardship and circularity. This is a really big impact topic, so we're going to do our best today to give you a really solid overview with lots of opportunities to dive deeper after the call. And we can go to the next slide. Some quick housekeeping before we begin. Closed captioning is available on this call, and you can control if and how it appears on your screen by clicking the CC button on your Zoom control bar. We're also going to be recording the standards content that we are covering here, and we'll share that recording and the follow-up email after this call. The content tracks, you'll learn about those in a second. Those will also be recorded, but the breakout rooms at the end that are more discussion-based will not be recorded or shared so that you can speak freely. And finally, please rename yourself to include your name, your company, and your pronouns if you'd like. Next slide. As we get into our content today on environmental stewardship, we know that it is really important for us to acknowledge and honor the ongoing stewardship of this land by Indigenous peoples. We have much to learn from the Indigenous communities that have lived and stewarded this land since time immemorial, and we hope that you'll look to their wisdom and guidance as you consider what it means to be a steward of this planet as a B Corp. I personally reside on Cherokee, Shawnee, and Yuchi land, and I encourage you to share in the chat whose territory you are joining from. And next slide. As you may know, today's webinar is one in a series of impact collabs where we're covering each impact topic of the new B Lab standards one by one. Today's call is the 5th in the series. We're halfway through, and we've got 3 more to go that we hope you'll join us for. You can register for all of these calls on the Beehive through the link that we'll share in the chat. And you can also find recordings and resources from these calls on the Beehive as well. Next slide. So we've got a lot to cover today, so we're just going to hop into it. We're going to start with an overview of the impact topic and requirements from Brigitte Niemes at B Lab Global and Clementina and Kylie from the B Lab US and Canada team. Then we're going to split into 2 content tracks where you can hear from B Corps on how they're already approaching the environmental stewardship and circularity requirements. For these, we'll go into 2, some folks will stay in the main room and some will go into a breakout room, but you'll just be listening to the speakers, so these aren't conversational breakout rooms. After the content tracks, we're going to come back to the main room for a Q&A facilitated by Kylie from the B Lab US and Canada team. And a quick note, please be submitting your questions throughout the call via the Q&A function in Zoom rather than sending them in the chat. This lets us keep track of the questions to answer at the end, and you can also upvote the questions that you would most like to see answered live. I'll then close us out with resources and calls to action, and then we'll end the call in breakout rooms, which you can opt into based on the discussion topic that most interests you. Now, the environmental stewardship and circularity impact topic is particularly meaty, but our goal for today is to give you an introduction to it and begin answering your general questions. Because of the number of sub-requirements in this topic, we aren't going to cover every single one in great detail, but we hope that this is a really helpful start and that you leave with lots of case studies and resources that you can use to dive deeper into the ESC requirements after the call. We might not be able to discuss the specifics of your company because we want to prioritize questions that are relevant to the majority of attendees. And while our assurance model is also still in development, we're going to do our best to answer your questions based on the compliance criteria within the standards. However, we know that some of your questions might remain unanswered, and if you have any questions that you want to follow up on, I encourage you to ask in the ESC Beehive group or to reach out to us at community@bcorporation.net. Now, before we get into the impact topic overview, we want to share some info that will hopefully help you understand the new standards and how they're tailored for your company's context. So the first thing is that under the new standards, company size is determined by number of workers or revenue, whichever is higher. This information is also included in the knowledge base article that we're going to link in the chat in case you need to reference it later. And now, this one is, I think, particularly interesting for ESC. Sector is a really important part of contextualizing these requirements. And these are the definitions that we use to determine which of the 5 sectors your company is in. So the first is agriculture. And this sector is applicable for companies that harvest soil-based crops, raw materials, or source the majority of inputs directly from farms. So this includes companies like vegetable or livestock farms and coffee plantations or roasters. The next one is the manufacturing sector. So this is applicable for companies that take direct control over or transform input materials. This includes food and beverage producers or apparel manufacturers. The third one is wholesale or retail, which is intended for companies that do not have their own production, but do take responsibility for the product that they sell within a supply chain. So this is like grocery stores, consumer goods companies that don't manufacture their own products, to give a couple examples. And then for the service sector, there are two distinctions. There's a sector for those with minor footprint and those with significant footprint. So minor footprint companies are those that don't require a physical location to deliver their services. So that's like a consulting, accounting, marketing firm. And if you're a service with significant footprint company, your service does involve machinery or a specific operational location. So that includes like hotels, restaurants, and landscaping companies, to name a few. Now that's a lot to take in, but hopefully it gives you at least a general idea of what sector your company might be in. So we're going to launch a quick poll and let us know which sector you think that your company is in. And the answers are coming in. They're coming in quick. And we've got a good distribution. I'll give you a couple more seconds. I'm seeing a lot of service with minor footprint companies, which was expected. A lot of manufacturing, a lot of wholesale retail. And yeah, feel free to drop questions in the chat. If we aren't able to get to your specific company's context, you can also follow up after, and we'll check in. Awesome. We have at least one from each sector, so that is super interesting. Keep those in mind as we go forward. And yes, this will also be helpful for deciding which content track you would like to join in a bit, but we'll circle back to that. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, the last piece of context of thinking about the standards, you're also going to hear us talk a little bit about year 0, year 3, and year 5 throughout the call. Year 0 requirements are those that need to be met by the company's initial certification, whether you are already a B Corp or not. So if you're recertifying in 2027, that's your year 0. Year 3 requirements will be met by year 3, and year 5 by year 5. And at each of those years, you'll also need to meet the previous year's requirements. So by year 5, you'll be meeting the year 5, year 3, and year 0 requirements. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Clementina to begin our overview of the ESC impact topic.
Thank you so much, Carson. Hello, everyone. I hope you're taking a moment to feel grounded. There's going to be a lot of information on this call, so I hope we can be present with each other throughout it. The environmental stewardship and circularity impact topic is one that is very near and dear to my heart, and it's in response to the intensifying impacts of both climate change and having ecosystems reach critical tipping points. This means that businesses must fundamentally shift how they're interacting with nature. The environmental stewardship and circularity topic addresses these challenges by having businesses implement the following criteria. We look at environmental monitoring, so having businesses understand what their impacts are on the environment, as well through environmental impact assessments, having a materiality assessment, so understanding what materials you use and the ways in which they may or may not recirculate, having sustainable resource use, so thinking more proactively about where your resources will end up after you've used them. Also looking at responsible procurement practices, as well as circular design. So this impact topic really encourages businesses to have a more holistic approach to the way that they do business and understanding ecosystem services as actually a value aspect of a business itself. And if we go to the next slide, I'd also like to tie this into climate justice and how important a climate justice framework is when it comes to reaching the environmental stewardship and circularity impact topic standard. So on this slide, you'll see the principles for partnership. This was developed by B Lab US and Canada in partnership with Forum for the Future, as well as frontline community leaders. And this is a really robust resource. I highly encourage you all to go take a look at it. And really, this is a great framework for implementing a lot of the standards we're going to be talking about today. And I'll just give a few key examples of the ways that the principles for partnership can really elevate your strategies when it comes to environmental stewardship and circularity. First of all, you can invite frontline communities to state the environmental impacts of what your business's operations are. So really, those frontline and impacted communities will be the ones that know best what your business's impacts are. And then you can go a step further and actually build joint monitoring programs with those communities in order to understand your environmental impact assessment. There's also many opportunities to listen to frontline communities on how to address your company's actual and potential negative environmental impacts. Furthermore, you can build equitable supply chain partnerships using the principles as a framework, and you can develop circular economy strategies through collaboration with industry partners, non-governmental organizations, academia, and frontline community partners. So the principles really form a robust framework for building out these partnerships that I think are really critical to having a success in the environmental stewardship and circularity topic. And with that, I will pass it forward so that we can get into the topic itself.
Passing it over to Brigitte.
Thank you so much. So let's get into the environmental stewardship and circularity topic. So how this topic is structured, it follows basically the good practices of impact management. Thereby, what I mean is that it starts with assessing and measuring impact, then setting targets and defining plans, implementing the plan, monitoring, and also adapting it when needed. This is basically the impact management flow that we also try to replicate with the structure of the requirements. And aside from that, as mentioned also by Clementina, there is an increased emphasis on circularity and also on supply chain management. Let's look into the first requirement, ESC1, which is about that the company knows its actual and potential impacts on the environment. If we dive into this, what you can see on this slide is that the majority of these sub-requirements are about understanding the company's environmental impact, especially the first 6 sub-requirements focus on the company's own operations, so the direct operations of the company. Companies who have already been engaged with the B Corp certification before might see some of these measuring metrics familiar, because B6, the previous version of the standards, also had many of these metrics already integrated. So the new standards built on them, and it also includes metrics for waste production, energy use, and water consumption. Okay. And regarding animal welfare, it only applies if the company is directly involved in the raising, transportation, and slaughtering of the animals, and does not include the purchase of animal products from third parties, because that would be more in the company's supply chain. So these are really focusing on the company's direct operations. Another key sub-requirement in this section is the environmental assessment. Companies are asked from medium and larger size on in all sectors except for the service with minor footprint to identify their actual and potential environmental impacts in their operations and value chain. This is the ESC 1.7 sub-requirement. And by year 3, they are also required to publicly share these material environmental issues. Okay. Let's move on to the second requirement, which is about the company has a strategy to address its actual and potential negative environmental impacts and to support staying within ecological thresholds. If we zoom into this, the first sub-requirement, ESC 2.1, is about the strategy. So you remember under ESC 1.7, companies are identifying their actual and potential negative environmental impacts. So now they need to define a plan to address those environmental impacts. So this strategy needs to have quantitative targets and indicators, clearly defined roles and responsibilities, and also a plan to engage and work with stakeholders. In addition, to complement this, there are also additional sub-requirements whereby companies are asked that their policies and procedures address the material environmental impact areas. For instance, if deforestation is a material environmental issue, then the company needs to have a policy that addresses deforestation. And in addition, companies also need to develop guidance for their workers on how to implement these policies. So this is required for all medium and larger companies in all sectors except for the service with minor footprint. In addition, larger companies are also required to have a biodiversity transition plan and a water stewardship plan. Now, why we zoomed in on biodiversity for larger companies is that with global efforts to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030, we wanted to make sure that larger B Corps are also developing a dedicated biodiversity transition plan to support these global efforts and the global biodiversity framework. And similarly, larger companies are also required to have a dedicated water stewardship plan to reduce water use, minimize water pollution, especially in areas at water risk. But these strategies also need to have plans to engage their suppliers as well. So it's both for the company's own operations and their supply chain as well. Right? And last but not least, there are also specific sub-requirements for the service with minor footprint sector. So for this sector, we wanted to ensure that they act on the areas that matters most for them in terms of impact. So that's why there are sub-requirements where we ask specific industries within this sector to have a process in place to assess the actual or potential negative environmental impacts related to their clients or projects and take any mitigation action to reduce or minimize those impacts. And also for specific financial industries like equity investing or investment advising, we also ask those industries to assess the investments for potential negative environmental impacts and take any mitigation action. And with this, I believe I hand it over to my colleagues.
Thank you, Brigida. We'll get into ESC3. And this is all about the topic of circularity. So I'm going to take a moment. We had a question in the chat, and I'm just going to take a moment to kind of define circularity briefly so that we're all on the same page, as we're going to refer to this quite a bit. So circularity is in reference to the circular economy. I'll share a link later on with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which has a great overview introducing the circular economy. And essentially, the circular economy is a system where materials never become waste and nature is regenerated through the practice of engaging with the circular economy. So when we're referencing circularity, we're referencing designing with this outcome in mind. So looking at circularity, we'll get into it now. Next slide, please. And ESC3 does cover several different sections in reference to circularity. We won't go into detail in 3.1, 3.2, 3.4, or 3.5 today, but I'll just do a quick overview. So 3.1 has the company monitoring its material inflow. This is everything from raw materials to packaged materials, as well as associated process materials. So anything you would use in a manufacturing process. 3.2 has the company reducing its use of virgin non-renewable materials such as iron ore or plastics. 3.4 has the company understanding the recovery infrastructure available where it sells its products. This is just knowing like your recycling options and kind of ways of getting things repaired or maintained. And 3.5, the company takes steps to increase the recovery of its products and packaging after their end of life. So again, kind of tying into this idea of not having materials go to waste. But let's just take a moment to get into 3.3. So in 3.3, it states that by year 3, Small and larger wholesale, retail, service with significant footprint, manufacturing, agriculture growers, companies are incorporating circularity principles into their product development. And this can be done by choosing one or more of the following options that you can see on the slide. So 3.3A has avoiding and reducing single-use products and packaging. 3.3B is designing products for long-term use. 3.3C has products are able to recirculate after use. So you have a way of ensuring that your products are being recirculated. There's kind of a secondhand economy for them, or they can be repaired and maintained. 3.3D, again, products are able to recirculate at their end of life. So once the products are no longer able to be used for their intended purpose, there is another way to recirculate them after they've completed their end of life. And some really great examples of this are breweries that will use discard from bakeries to create their alcoholic beverages, for example. There are many other examples. I know Jamie had shared one when answering the chat. And you can learn more about this in the standards PDF. And I highly encourage you to get as many examples as possible, because there's some really neat things that people are doing with circularity. Now I'll move on to the next slide. And here we're taking a look at ESC4. This has the company taking action to prevent and mitigate its actual and potential negative environmental impacts. So if we go to the next slide, I'll get into it a little bit more. Now, essentially, ESC4 is kind of the result of what you would do with ESC1 and ESC2. In ESC1, you're monitoring and assessing your actual and potential negative environmental impacts. So again, understanding what is actually happening and potentially could happen to the environment in a negative way through your business operations. In ESC2, as Brigitte covered really thoroughly, you're developing a strategy for addressing these impacts. Again, this is a really great way to kind of bring in the principles of partnership, really create those connections with frontline and impacted communities who would know the actual and potential negative impacts. And that way, when you get to ESC4 and you're really taking action on your strategies that you've developed, you're ensuring that your actions are holistic and you're not causing harm by taking those actions. So really thinking kind of holistically about the impacts that you're having on the environment, but also not just, taking an action that isn't aware of how it might impact your community or other folks who would potentially have any impact from that. So you want to record actions and demonstrate outcomes against the measurements from ESC1 by year 3. Even if there isn't a positive impact yet, you just want to demonstrate that you are taking action in alignment with the strategy that you've developed. And you want to make progress against the strategies you've developed in ESC2 by year 5. And now I'll pass it over to Kylie to talk about ESC5.
Thank you, Clementina. So we'll wrap up here with ESC5. ESC5 involves preventing and mitigating the environmental impact of your supply chain, which is an absolutely critical lever to having a more sustainable and equitable global economy. This should be done alongside Human Rights 4, which is the social impact component of your supply chain. Now, I want to take a minute here to really stress the interconnectedness of the new standards. In this case, we have a clear connection between the intersection of human and environmental rights, as well as human health and environmental health. So as you pursue achieving the new standards, remember that there are many cases like this where there's some real solid interconnection and an ability to achieve both impact topics at the same time. In this case, some of the connections with HR Human Rights 4 are that the company addresses limits on its ability to engage and monitor suppliers, and that it works with suppliers to mitigate or prevent the most salient human rights abuses. So really thinking about how we have this connection between human rights and environmental rights at play. Now, depending on your company size and sector, ESC5 here, it might require considering the environmental impact of procurement decisions. So where and how you obtain the products that you use to operate your business. It might require, as I said, for HR4, working with suppliers to mitigate impact, environmental impact. So really partnering with the folks that are helping you to keep your business running to be able to mitigate impact on the environment. And then last but not least, it can also include improving and tracing the sourcing of raw materials, ensuring that the origin and potential environmental impacts of high-risk raw materials are addressed. So again, really important here to consider the overall importance of partnerships, and going back to what Clementina shared earlier around the principles for partnership, those can play a big role here as well. Back over to you, Carson.
Thank you so much, Kylie. So that wraps our impact topic overview. But as you know, the environmental stewardship and circularity impact topic is really heavily contextualized by your sector. So for this next section, we're going to break into 2 content tracks where you can hear from B Corps who are already doing some of this great work. These are just educational breakout rooms, so there's no need to speak or share in them. You can just show up as you are and listen. And they are hopefully a really great opportunity to hear directly from B Corps in a smaller setting. So based on the poll and what we've talked about in the chat, hopefully you have a sense of which sector you're in. But if not, you can also just pick based on which content track resonates most with you and your work. So we can go to the next slide. Our first track is going to stay in the main room. This is for service with minor footprint companies. And you'll hear from Kate Harvey of Pure Strategies and Tim Frick of Mighty Bites on how to consider the environmental impact of your suppliers and your clients. And again, if you choose this content track, you will stay here in the main room. The second track is going to be in a breakout room, and this will be for companies in all other sectors. So service with major footprint or significant footprint, agriculture and growers, manufacturing, and wholesale retail. And in this room, you'll hear from Annie Agel from Cotopaxi and Shamini Dana from Dana Inc. on environmental impact assessments and circularity best practices. So we're going to go ahead and open up these 2 content tracks, and feel free to pick the room where the sector or the content most resonates with you. So we'll give folks a couple minutes to hop to the breakout room, give our speakers a chance to go. I'm going to go off mute and let Kate take it away while we are transferring people over.
Great. Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Kate Harvey. I work at Pure Strategies. We're a sustainability consulting firm and a B Corp since 2017, and fall into the category of service with a minor environmental footprint. And if you could go to the next slide, please. So we help companies, mostly CPGs and also retailers, to build and implement sustainability programs. And we work across strategy, climate, agriculture, packaging, nature, and chemicals. So a lot of the work that we do is mitigating the impacts of businesses in the environmental and social spaces. But could you go to the next slide, please? However, our impact really is largely a function of the actions that our clients take, but also the actions that our clients don't take. So this is an example of some of the businesses that we work with. And I think we're all aware that there are businesses out there that don't act necessarily in good faith to mitigate their environmental impacts. The clearest example that we know is, I think, the fossil fuel industry is often called out for working against supporting a safe climate future. That's a clear example, but what we found is that there's often a lot of projects that we're not always sure exactly how to assess, or if we're helping to support unintended impacts. So if you go to the next slide. So to give you an example, I'm going to walk through a few case examples of situations that we've talked through. And I have a poll, if maybe you could put the poll up while I'm talking. So in one example, this is a Canadian tobacco company. It's a world leader in fine cigars. It sources tobacco globally from a network of suppliers, over 5,000. It has aggressive science-based climate targets, so it's working to address climate. And it's now seeking to further develop its responsible tobacco sourcing program. So we like responsible sourcing. They asked us for a proposal to increase regenerative and organic agriculture practices in our wheelhouse through its supply chain, and also to support the well-being of smallholder tobacco farmers. So, should we work with this business? Is this a proposal that we should submit? We should submit a response to, in the intention of upholding our commitment to supporting positive environmental outcomes and impact. So, if you can maybe end the poll. Can folks see the response? I'm seeing about 33% said yes, 29% said no, and 37% said not sure. So yeah, this is, we sort of agreed. So the next slide, please. And if you could bring the poll up again. So this is another example that we encountered, Big Foods, Inc. So Big Foods, Inc. is among the world's largest processors of beef, pork, and chicken. The company has been the subject of investor scrutiny via shareholder resolutions. It's on the Nature 100 list, so meaning it's being called out for its lack of response to deforestation risks and its beef, palm oil, and soy supply chains. In response, the executive leadership team has asked the company to update its deforestation risk assessment, and they have asked us for a proposal to do this work. Do you think we should do this work? Give folks a moment to ask, to respond. So if you could close the poll, please. So I am seeing about 39% said yes, 42% said no, and 18% said, I'm not sure. So again, a case where it's a little, not sure. Could you go to the next slide, please? And also open the poll. So this was another case that we were discussing, New Water Co. So a Fortune 500 company recently spun off its global water business into a new standalone business. This new business has plans to develop and introduce the most sustainable bottled water brand on the market in the world. And New Water Co. has asked us for a proposal to advise on water sourcing and a packaging strategy for this new brand. Should we submit a proposal? So the poll is open. And we can close the poll. So the results are, I see 52% said yes, 34% said no, and 14% said I'm not sure. So if we go to the next slide, please, you can see that it is, it's challenging. So our mission as a service provider is to transform business to create a more sustainable future. But when and how we choose to transform business, which businesses we choose, which projects we pick is not always very straightforward, because there's lots of ways that businesses could support a more sustainable future. So to help ourselves, if you go to the next slide, we decided to create some guardrails. And this is a work in progress. But we thought this is our response to ensuring that we're not creating unintended consequences in the work that we do with our clients. So our hard nose, so Pure Strategies will not work with weapons manufacturers, fossil fuel companies, tobacco products, or casino gambling organizations. So these, we landed on these because this was informed in part by the B Corp guardrails. So it was nice to have an authoritative resource to turn to and say, others have also called out these businesses. But also we just felt that these, fossil fuel companies in particular are amplifying climate impacts. These others do not align with our social mission that we have. So we we do not submit proposals to those organizations. From the case studies, I think what you can see is that there are other businesses where there may be reasons to work with them, but questions to answer. So we've created a list where additional discussion and research is required when the primary focus of the business is meat, bottled water, soda, dessert or sugary foods, fast fried food, chemical manufacturers, GMOs, synthetic pesticides and herbicides, plastic packaging, or big banks. So the reason for this list is, again, it's informed in part by the B Corp guardrails, but meat is on this list because meat, we know, is sort of a primary driver of climate, and there may be some companies where that is the focus of their business, and we need to think about, is the project that we are doing for them helping to truly mitigate their climate impact? Or is it really sort of helping them to support their business model and, in a sense, greenwashing? So those are kind of the questions that we have when we're approached by a company that's primary revenue is driven from meat products. Are they looking to do they have some investment in a plant-based food revenue stream? So what is their intention? Bottled water is similar. Soda and some sugary foods, I think this is for the nutritional aspect of it. And fried food is fast food as well. Again, that's not to say we won't work with these businesses, but it really depends on the nature of the project. Chemical manufacturers, GMOs, and synthetic pesticides and herbicides. So we work a lot in regenerative agriculture and green chemistry. So it, again, depends on the nature of what we're being asked. So I think we found as an organization that having these guardrails in place helps us to better evaluate the proposals we're coming in, because frankly, we're a consulting firm, so we do need clients, and we're not in a position to be saying no to everything, but we do need a structure in place that helps us to maintain our missions-led values and also our business revenue. So that is our way of supporting this B Corp requirement. And again, a work in progress, and would be happy to talk through this more with folks in the breakout room when we get there.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was amazing and very informative. Appreciate you sharing. And then I'm going to pass it over to Tim for our second section.
Thank you, Carson. Go ahead and move on to the next slide, please. Awesome. So I'm Tim from Mighty Bytes. Mighty Bytes has been around since 1998. We're a digital agency, which means we run digital marketing campaigns, create, design websites, and create software for our clients, most of which are mission aligned with the B Corp community. We have a number of different criteria that we go through when we're trying to look for suppliers or vet suppliers. As a marketing agency, it took a while for us to kind of wrap our head around what actual supply chain of a marketing agency might be. We very early on, we became a B Corp in 2011, and very early on in that process decided to implement a buy from B Corp's first policy in 2013. And that just means that we purchase from certified B Corps whenever possible, with a preference for neighborhood or local suppliers if that's feasible. And then we always try to keep a list of options for those things as needs come up and such. We're also an LGBT certified business enterprise, which means we give preference to suppliers owned by underrepresented or otherwise marginalized communities. Generally, we have a clear code of ethics. As a tech-focused company, a lot of our code of ethics is tech-based, but we generally look for products or services with public-facing sustainability and human rights statements, or a code of ethics like ours. Examples for physical products might be Energy Star or EPEAT ratings on physical products that we might get. When those more sustainable options are not available, we tend to look for more viable ethical alternatives. And generally, one of the things I love about the new B Corp standards is this focus on continuous improvement. As a digital agency that does a lot of agile cycles and stuff like that, we're really all in on that continuous improvement. And so, we're always looking at this policy and the decisions we make around it about like, how can we do better and stuff. And so I have a few resources that I can share either here or in the follow-up to the presentation afterwards. Next slide, though. Thanks, Carson. So in terms of figuring out what our supply chain is as a digital agency that builds software, the internet represents. I just read a thing today. I have a note here that it's usually between 2 to 7, but the IEEE, the standards organization, mentioned it's more like 7 to 10% of annual global emissions. So that's a huge amount of climate impact. And it's growing quickly. I think the 2 to 7 going up to 7 to 10 is largely based on the rapid development of AI. And AI is also helping to improve efficiency, but it's also got this huge environmental impact that you may or may not be aware of. So when we're working with partners, we want to make sure that they understand these problems because that then helps us create collective impact. So I'm going to unpack a little bit about what a digital supply chain means for an agency. Next slide, please. So some examples of what a digital supply chain looks like for us. We do a lot of WordPress development. And so that could be, plugins that we use in WordPress. And let's say one of those plugins that we put on a WordPress site that we build uses a ton of AI in the background and we're not really aware of it. That really ups the amount of electricity and as well as water use and all of these other environmental impacts and stuff on that. So considering the plugins that we use, the email marketing solutions, I included EcoSend here because they're a certified B Corp and they're a low emissions email marketing platform, but there's a bunch of other ones out there. The other thing could be software tools like application programming interfaces or APIs that are calling out to other servers or other data centers and pulling data back into your website. And then there's a ton of AI tools, as I mentioned. There is a more recent one called GreenPT that has more sustainable infrastructure, but generally AI has a huge environmental impact. So if we're building tools on behalf of our clients or even in our own operations, understanding what those impacts are is important. Next slide, please. So generally what we've tried to do in this, we started working on this shortly after we became a certified B Corp in 2011. And over the course of the last dozen years or so, we've been working on a bunch of tools and standards and models for estimating digital emissions and all of this kind of stuff. But the reality is that to solve really big, wicked problems like the environmental impact of the internet, all industries are going to need awareness, education, tooling, and standards and regulations. Those are 4 critical things. So when we're making supplier decisions, we really want to make sure that we're working with organizations that understand these kinds of things. And so we've worked on the web sustainability guidelines with the World Wide Web Consortium, which is meant to help sustainability principles get imbued into all of the work that people do on the web. And we created emissions models, and we've created a couple tools and collaborated with some others on tools to kind of help people assess these things. And so the partnerships that we create, are supplier based sometimes, but sometimes they're also in this gray area, for instance, of like the sustainablewebdesign.org site that we created with Whole Grain Digital. They're another B Corp, they're an agency, they're out of London, and we've collaborated with them on an educational resource to help people kind of understand these concepts and stuff. And so suppliers for us it casts pretty much a broader net. It's not just about, the products that we buy or the suppliers that we use. It's really about who we actively want to partner with on these things.
Sector, a really great opportunity to understand product and understand what repairs could look like. It also starts generating really important feedback that can help you reiterate product to make it more repairable. And so it's really started to influence our product design. We've had a good feedback loop from our circularity services that have really informed some of the decisions we make with product. Issues around zippers, really thinking about zipper repairability, which, zippers I probably think is one of the best and one of the worst inventions for apparel, and that, so great for functionality, but the vast majority of more technical repairs in the product space are zippers. So that really informed a lot of our design about making our zippers very easy to replace. Also, again, really thinking about durability, there were some principal fabrics that we were using that we thought were really great, but they were failing left, right, and center. We were getting too many returns, and unless you have repair services, it really can't help inform product design. So there's a lot of commercial benefits of circularity, but I think where you really make it sing, and I think it's easy to feel like circularity can feel like one initiative, and that's separate from the environmental stewardship. I think to get success and really ensure that circularity is relating to your overall climate strategy, you need to find ways of integrating those two tracks of work and really seeing what you do around decarbonization. That's part of circularity, and circularity is part of decarbonization. And so really making sure that those two sort of initiatives and tracks of work, which are a bit separate because a lot of circularity requires all of this post-consumer, post-sale interventions, that whereas decarbonization and the work with suppliers is obviously pre-sale. One of the things that I'm most excited about what we're working on at Cotopaxi is something that we share credit for with a bunch of outdoor brands. And so in the supply chain, we've been a longtime collaborator of Patagonia. I always joke that I speak to their team more frequently than I do my own on some weeks, which I think is really fantastic. But through the Outdoor Industry Association, which is, in my opinion, a really amazing industry association. I wish all trade associations had their sort of moral compass. But through OIA, we have really worked to identify shared suppliers with like-minded brands and bring in Allotrope and GEI, which are two technical partners which really have a deep knowledge of how to help transition facilities to fossil fuel free alternatives in the heat-based process. So in Tier 2, we know that the outdoor industry, our most carbon intensive processes actually occur in Tier 2, where you're really treating the dye. We obviously we're still in bed with synthetics. There are certain products that can absolutely have natural fiber alternatives, but in outdoor, we really need the performance and functionality of really high performance products and fabrics that can be moisture wicking and really provide protection from the elements and really serve as high functional items. And so in Tier 2, we've worked with OIA and a technical provider, GEI, to help the process along of transitioning our Tier 2 fabric suppliers away from coal-based heat processes and coal-based boilers to electric alternatives. So really working on electrification processes. And we know that's what's really going to reduce emissions, not just for one brand, but for all brands. And in Tier 1, we've really tried to transition all Tier 1s onto battery-supported solar voltaics, and not just going after SBTI. This is sort of my issue. And a lot of times what we found with some of our technical providers is the thing that realizes maybe the best reductions on paper for SBTI are really not what's best for the community. And so we've decided and opted to set SBTI goals, but not actually do it through SBTI. So we've used that framework to set goals, but due to organizational sort of misgivings on how SBTI has handled itself, Cotopaxi's actually chosen to just set its own targets and proceed ahead, but also proceed along a more holistic line when it comes to emissions reductions, which might be a little bit different from other organizations, but I think we've heard from other B Corps that they're that climate justice is really important, and making sure that there is that climate justice piece means looking at decarbonization projects that are more integrated with communities, not just helping a single facility transition, but really looking at how can facility transition also be a community transition that benefits workers and workers' communities. So there's some really exciting projects we have going on there. And because there's a shared investment between like-minded brands, you really lower the upfront costs, and you really help sort of present a united front that's clear, with a shared set of priorities and goals between companies. So the supplier isn't dealing with 9 separate requests for decarbonization progress. There's a sense of, hey, we're coming to you with a proposal. We've identified a resource partner here. We will share some technical ideas with you. You will be a full partner and a collaborator in this process, but you will not be expected to pay for this on your own. This isn't going to be one more thing in an incredibly tariff-addled period for suppliers that they're going to have to pay for. So I think it's about connecting these dots when we think about environmental stewardship, and again, not compartmentalizing so much, making sure that there's a sense of like, yes, there are all these various priorities, but this is what is layering up into our corporate strategy for environmental stewardship. And understanding that when you're thinking about circularity, you need to think about supplier decarbonization. And when you're thinking about supplier decarbonization, you also need to keep in mind of what that product life cycle is. So I'll kind of pause there.
Thank you,
I'm
Annie.
gonna jump in the chat here.
Yes, that would be wonderful. It's really great to hear from you. And I wish we could stay here way longer because you have such rich information. And thank you for sharing so thoroughly. I want to make sure that Shamini has time also. So welcome, Shamini. I will share your slides in a second. Let me pin you here. And you can go ahead and start, and I will share the slides.
Well, thank you, everyone. Annie, that was a great overview. Appreciate all the great wisdom of nuggets that Annie and Cotopaxi are really making headway in circularity. Today, my topic is going to be a little different. Our company, Dana Inc., has been around for now 17 years. We've pivoted 3 times to just give you context. We were a full fashion brand for the first 7 since 2008 till 2017, where we then pivoted towards circularity and joined the circular movement with Ellen MacArthur Foundation, calling on the brands. Then in 2020, after launching our circular fashion collection in 2020, we pivoted one more time towards becoming a full fashion technology company, embedding all our experience and expertise into what we would call a digital transformation for the fashion industry. So today we are a full brand, but we are a services company, what we would call a fashion technology company. So what you see here today is something that we are passionate about. And with technology, we are giving our platform, D-Sphere. It's a patented platform to really push forward in utilizing what we call second life materials. This is part of the circularity strategy in the fashion and apparel industry, which is reduce your intake on virgin, increase your intake on second life materials, reuse after the first stance of the product, remake and upcycle. And so when you look at something like this in this photograph here, which is upcycled denim, all these products have got a second life, if not sometimes a third and a fourth. And so what we're helping and advancing, working with fashion brands and even companies, organizations, nonprofits, is how to bring some of these second life textiles into new products. And so today I'm going to share with you one case study, which is how we partner with universities. And this is an ongoing effort. A case in point is one that we are going to talk about quite deeply. But to really hone down on why we're doing this is because the next generation of fashion designers truly do have a unique opportunity of personalization and customization using technology, right? And so they have, using our platform, which we are offering now to all sorts of fashion tech stakeholders, including brands, retailers, manufacturers, and even customers, a co-creation using the Second Life textiles. This sort of target market, when you talk about growth, it is targeted to be anywhere between 160 billion, if not more, by the end of this decade. And so when you leverage this sort of technology, it's not just providing circularity as an option, but it also provides deep experience when it comes to the power of co-creation and providing the customers now an opportunity to be part of the design process. Yeah, so this is a real paradigm shift in the fashion industry, but one we believe has definitely a value, ability to grow, and also to have what we call multi-collaboration partnerships going forward. Next slide, please. So my goal here is to do the following, is basically communicate with all of you what this opportunity is, to celebrate why people are investing in this new way of creating product in the fashion world, and also taking a leap on technology, to really ensure that the commitment here is about using technology for good. And when I say technology, it's the whole realm that we use as part of our platform and our services, all the way from digitization to AR, VR, to AI, and also to all kinds of different MLs and technology. We also, in terms of the collective action, we want to address that this is to address what we are collectively facing, which is the reduction in textile waste, which is a huge endeavor. And then finally, it's offering collaboration to all fashion stakeholders, right? So this presentation is, think this as a big topic. Next slide, please. So if you look at this particular slide, what does this have in common? You have what we call digital images of a T-shirt, but they all look very different. Interestingly enough, this particular case study, which is Fanshawe College, which we partnered with in Canada, and we are talking about over 200 students now who've gone through the process, have created Second Life materials into a T-shirt that when you see this as digital, there is actually a real T-shirt behind it, right? But what is happening here is the visualization. When you look at a T-shirt and it has many panels, you can only use your imagination to imagine what it could possibly be. But with technology, there's a huge amount of ability to scale and look at what is possible. Next slide, please. And so what the dSphere platform actually has 7 modules. We're just going to concentrate on the first one, which is the studio, where these students came in, both from the US and Canada. And what they had was a template like this, but with the template, they were able to then upload their Second Life materials into a material library, and then they were able to customize it. So one design could have a million possibilities, which the human brain cannot conceive, right? And that's what the power of technology is about. Now, this is just a T-shirt. It can apply to any other staple design. It could be a pair of jeans, it could be a dress, it could be, a hoodie, whatever. But we're using this as an example. And you can actually go onto our platform now and actually see it. But what they found out was power of technology, right? Next slide. And so with this partnership, these fashion designers realized the potential of becoming brands themselves. In fact, 9 brands were birthed from this particular partnership. Next slide. And so this is the technology that we're using currently. It allows for visualization, the variations of combination before it even gets to be produced. It allows for the end customer to come in and really tweak what they want, or even choose to using a drag and drop. It actually provides a transparency to who makes the clothes, because on a different module, you actually get to connect it with the garment workers if choose be. There is definitely an impact on the environment as we're using Second Life materials for this t-shirt. It's zero water, right? We're just utilizing water. So you can think about companies who are technology companies that use swag out there, and then they could actually possibly change their minds, transform into using Second Life materials out there, right? And this model is both a direct to consumer, business to business, as well as the ability to do it from B2B to C. Now, they had 3 goals for this partnership. One was, the ability to understand what the impact of fashion designers on the environment through circularity. Next slide. The second one is what fast fashion would do if you were to take on this same process. And then, of course, how you use technology for good. Next slide. So these are some of the actual results of what the students ended up having, right? Next slide, please. So they were able to do 3 things all together during this process. One is to do direct to consumer, which is their population, right? They allowed personalization with your population, which is the student body population. And they also allowed further customization with their student body population. Understand where they sourced the material was all from their student body population. And so it was very much a closed loop sort of ecosystem that was being generated. And then finally, they had a huge marketplace where they sold these goods. And now they understand the potential of launching new brands this way, right? And so minimizing the impact on virgin materials, but maximizing the impact on customer engagement, the ability to use technology, and also to reduce their environmental impact. Next slide, please. Here are some of the reflections from the professor herself. She really did feel that in the next 12 months, at that point, this was last year, and we went through the program again, and the students actually benefited even more, to the point now they're actually launching their own brands on the platform. Yeah. Next slide. And so I wanted to end this. The reasons why we partnered with universities, and we still do, is that we believe that we need to impart circularity principles and the innovation that can happen within it. Number 2, absolutely the potential of understanding entrepreneurship with this new technology, the benefits of how technology can work for good, as well as bring in the customer to co-design. It's all about democratization of fashion and the design element to it. And then finally, for the ability for the next era of new generation customers and brands, this is a hyper fast way to launch a brand and scale using technology, right? And so I'm going to end with this slide, which is kind of fun. These are all shirts. We all have shirts which are woven, but then they could be used into all these different ways because it's being repurposed, reused, and remade and remanufactured. And so this is the potential we can see going forward in terms of a circular strategy on remake, reuse, upcycle, and repurposing. So I hope that this case study kind of shows you the ability for partnership, circularity, and we'll be sharing a lot of different resources for you. We do a lot of work with all sorts of stakeholders in the circular strategy using technology. And then currently, we are also building out one of our nonprofits called Accelerating Circularity here in the United States. Their textile to textile recycling program, and Dana is the partner. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Shamini.
This is our first time trying the 2 content tracks, and we are a little short on time. So I'm going to close this out. We're going to do a quick Q&A, and then if you can stay on after, we have some really great opportunities for questions and further conversation in the breakout rooms. So wanted to say a quick thank you so much to all of our amazing speakers. Huge round of applause. We are so grateful for all of you for being here. And also thank you to you as attendees for showing up today to learn. We get to see every day how the climate crisis is impacting our lives and the lives of those around us. And it just feels really inspiring to be in this community of businesses that is ready to take on this challenge of taking care of this planet and being a good steward and considering our environmental impact. We know that it isn't easy work, but it is really crucial. And so because of that, I am so grateful to all of you for showing up to take this first step together. Now, I want to share some next steps that you can take to dive deeper into the content that we started to explore today. The first is to learn more about the ESC impact topic by taking our free immersion course on the topic. Especially since we are only able to do a high-level overview today, this course is a super valuable resource created by B Lab Global that covers the impact topic in more detail. Next, be sure to join the ESC group on the Beehive so that you can ask questions and share about how you're approaching the impact topic. We had some great conversations in the Service with Minor Footprint room that I think would be great to take onto the Beehive to continue. And then next, something I'm super excited about, if you want to dive deeper into circularity with peers in the B Corp community, we have a new group, B Network, launching called the B Corp Circularity Collective. They are hosting their launch event on September 16th, and they'll also be hosting a breakout room at the end of the call. So go learn more, ask them questions, and you can also register for the call at the link we'll share in the chat. And then finally, we're going to be sharing all of these resources as well as the ones mentioned throughout the call in a follow-up email after this call. And I particularly recommend the impact topic and practice guide that we'll be sharing, which breaks down the requirements and shares case studies from B Corps. So be sure to dive into those and please reach out to us if you have any other questions. And next slide. Finally, be sure to join us for the next Impact Collab on human rights. It's going to be on September 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, and you can register on the Beehive. And now I'm going to pass it over to Kylie for our super quick Q&A portion.
Thank you so much, Carson. Appreciate that. So we're just going to take 1 minute for the Q&A today because we want to make sure we can get everyone into the breakouts. But please do continue to drop your questions into the Q&A function below because we will be compiling a very robust Q&A follow-up to share with folks afterwards. So while we don't have time today to get to all the questions, we're also really glad that we've been able to answer many of them in the chat and in the breakouts. So we'll just do this one very juicy pre-submitted question. I think it's on a lot of folks' minds. And the question is, does the environmental stewardship and circularity impact topic provide frameworks for tracking environmental impact in remote-based businesses? And I would also assume that this question relates to businesses that are hybrid remote in person, which I know is more and more common these days. So if someone from the team would like to take this one, I think this is on a lot of folks' minds.
I'm happy to take that.
Thanks, Brigitte.
And also, if the person who submitted this is here, thanks for submitting it. So the requirements for tracking environmental impact do not apply to service with minor footprint companies. Because most likely when we are talking about fully remote-based companies or hybrid, those are most likely under service with minor footprint. So these monitoring metrics do not apply to them. Instead, for the service with minor footprint, what we ask is that they focus more on considering the environmental impact of their procurement decisions, and also, as mentioned earlier, for specific industries, we ask that they assess the actual and potential environmental impact of their clients or projects or investments. Additionally, these sub-requirements for the environmental impact tracking only apply to facilities that the company has operational control over. but that's for those sectors where it applies, right? So for the service with minor footprint, the monitoring metrics under ESC1, those do not apply, but they focus more on what matters most for the service with minor footprint companies. So their clients, projects, investments, and the procurement decisions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brigitte. That was the only pre-submitted question we had, but we also answered a lot live and through the Q&A function. So we'll also share out all of the questions asked in the Q&A in the follow-up email. So keep an eye out there. And we can go to the next slide.